Auschwitz, the site of the largest mass murder in history, where over 1 million men, women and children were killed. A third of them were Hungarian Jews, rushed into the gas chambers in 1944, a last desperate act in the Nazi plan to wipe out the Jewish people. Few of those responsible were ever prosecuted. But in 2015, 93-year-old ex-Nazi Oskar Gröning was brought to trial, accused of being an accessory to their murder. Survivors were called on to tell their stories. Still haunted by the Holocaust, this was their last chance for justice.
I dreamt, in my dream, my mother was in the gas chamber. And she was holding my brothers and sisters, waiting for the gas to come down. I woke up crying. It was so real, I can't tell you, it's unbelievable, to see her again. And she was exactly the same as I was when I left her. It's one thing when you die young, you're always the same.
However, one survivor shocked everyone. In court, Eva Kor hugged Gröning and forgave him for what he'd done. The other survivors were outraged.
How could you? How could you actually not think of what he's being tried for? Of what your family felt? I really can't understand it.
But Eva has a message she's determined to share.
I believe that forgiveness is such a powerful thing. It's free, it works, it has no side effects. And this troubled world desperately needs something beside punishment.
This is the story of a remarkable group of Auschwitz survivors, divided by a historic trial, and of the extraordinary journey that led this little girl to forgive the Nazis. This is controversial Auschwitz survivor Eva Kor. 20 years ago, she set up a Holocaust memorial museum here in her hometown of Terre Haute, Indiana. It's dedicated to all the twins who were subjected to horrific medical experiments while imprisoned at Auschwitz. It's a subject that Eva cares about deeply because she and her twin sister Miriam were among them.
Here is a picture that is 80 years old. I think the one to the left is me because I look more mischievous. And my mother liked to put us on this rug, and she was so proud when people would walk by and say, "Are they real or are they dolls?" And here, this is Miriam and that's me.
Eva and Miriam would be sent to Auschwitz with their parents and 2 elder sisters in 1944, along with more than 400,000 other Hungarian Jews. Most would be killed within hours of their arrival, all part of the final solution, the Nazi plan for the genocide of the Jewish people. The Nazi elite would be tried and punished for their involvement in the Holocaust. But most of those who worked at Auschwitz escaped justice because there wasn't enough evidence to prove their direct involvement in murder. Among them was 23-year-old SS Corporal Oskar Gröning.
He was known as the accountant of Auschwitz, and today 93-year-old Oskar Gröning has gone on trial in Germany charged with being an accessory to the murders of 300,000 Hungarian Jews during the Second World War.
Freispruch oder was? Ich weiß es nicht.
Gröning's trial was only possible because a recent court ruling means ex-Nazis can now be prosecuted simply for having worked at a death camp. Gröning never denied working at Auschwitz. He was responsible for counting the money and valuables stolen from the victims. Part of a system in which even the gold teeth extracted from the bodies of the dead were sent to Berlin to help the Nazi war effort. In court, Gröning admitted moral guilt and begged for forgiveness. But he wasn't going to get it from lifelong Nazi hunter Günther Feld, one of the prosecutors who brought Gröning to trial here in the German town of Lüneburg.
So he was not the man who gassed them with his own hands. He was not the man working at the crematorium to burn them. But he was the man who knew what happened. He was a little cog in the wheel. But any wheel runs only with all these little cogs.
Günther first discovered what happened in the concentration camps as a schoolboy, when he saw a film about the liberation of Belsen.
Of course, in school we had learned so much about the Nazi time, the concentration camp, what had happened there. But these pictures made it so much stronger for me. I could not believe that people can do these things to other people. I could not believe it. Terrible. Seeing these pictures, it makes me sure that justice has to be done until the last one of these criminals has died.
In 2014, Günther and the prosecutors began scouring the world for survivors who were prepared to give evidence in the trial of Oskar Gröning. Among those they approached were those who had moved to Britain after the war, like Leslie Kleinman from Southend.
Their question was, do you really think at 94 should he be punished? That's the question they asked me, the lawyers. And I told him, I don't feel sorry for him, because if I see my family now, they got taken away for no reason, I'm going to worry about him. They went to the gas chambers for what? Just because they were Jews. There's no other reason. That's me.
Another who felt Gröning should face justice was Susan Pollock from London. She lost over 50 members of her family in the Holocaust.
I miss my family. I wanted justice for them. I wanted their voices being heard through my mouth, because their loss is uppermost in my life.
Susan was one of a handful of the last survivors of Auschwitz who agreed to bear witness. Among them was the controversial Eva Kor.
Here I am, that little Jewish girl who the Nazis wanted to destroy, treating me like an inferior human being. Now, I was in Germany, in a German court, surrounded by German judges, by German attorneys, and I had the floor to tell my story.
Eva's story was one of the most shocking heard during the trial. Incredibly, it would end with her forgiving not just Oskar Gröning, but all the Nazis. At Auschwitz, the slaughter of Europe's Jews began in 1942, the same year that SS volunteer Oskar Gröning started working there as an accountant. While the victims were sent to the gas chambers, their possessions were searched for currency and valuables, and Gröning was responsible for counting the stolen money, before taking it to Berlin to help the Nazi war effort. Like all those in the SS, he'd been brought up to hate the Jews.
He told us, yes, I was convinced that Jews have to be killed, have to disappear from this earth. He told us about a little baby. He watched this scene at the beginning of being in Auschwitz, this little baby coming with some transport, and some SS men took it with the legs, hit the kid against some wall, and he was shocked. Gröning was shocked. He told us in the trial, and then he said, I think they could have killed this baby in a human way. So he openly told, I was of the opinion that Jews had to be killed.
The first of the Hungarian Jews that Gröning was accused of helping to murder arrived at Auschwitz in April 1944, just a month after the Nazis invaded Hungary. Among them was Eva Kor. 10-year-old Eva and her family, including twin sister Miriam, were taken from a Jewish ghetto and loaded with their luggage and personal possessions onto cattle trucks. It was all part of a great deception to convince them that they were being resettled somewhere in the east. 3 days later, they reached their true destination.
The doors opened and thousands of people poured out from those cattle cars onto a strip of land surrounded by Nazi guards with dogs and people with striped pajama clothes. And I was trying to figure out, what on earth is this place?
This was the scene that greeted Eva and her family. We know because these photographs were secretly taken by a German soldier during the arrival of a train full of Hungarian Jews. It was here on the platform, known as the ramp, that the Nazis decided who would live and who would die. Only those considered old enough and strong enough to work would survive. Often the families who arrived here consisted only of mothers with their children and the elderly, because the men had already been forced into hard labor. That's what happened in the case of Susan Pollock, who testified in the trial against Oskar Gröning.
What an exciting time, isn't it? Wow, my goodness.
After her father was taken away, 13-year-old Susan was sent to Auschwitz. On the ramp, a Jewish prisoner told her to tell the Nazis she was 15, old enough to work. When she did, she was separated from her mother.
I think I held her hands. And as she let go, I felt so abandoned. I felt so alone and so sad. I wanted to follow her, but I was ordered, stay. I had to stay where I was. And I saw my mom walking away from me. And I had a long look after her, and that was the last time I've seen her. Yeah.
Most of those selected to live like Susan would be used by the Nazis as slave labor. The rest, including mothers with young children, the elderly and infirm, were sent to the gas chambers. Some were photographed in the moments before. They had no idea what was about to happen. Scenes like these were repeated throughout the late spring and early summer of 1944. Among those sent to Auschwitz was 12-year-old Ivar Pearl, together with his mother, 3 brothers and 4 sisters.
All I remember feeling a bit excited, because I've never ever been on a journey before. And here I'm going on a train journey. It was an adventure.
When they got to Auschwitz, Ivar and his elder brothers were separated from the rest of their family.
And I ran over to my mother, and I could see her walking with my youngest brother and sister, holding on to her, and 2 elder sisters walking with her. And ran over there, and I said, I want to come with you, Mummy. She said, no, what are you doing here? No, go back. I said, no, please, Mummy, let me come with you, please. And she said, no, go back to your brothers. And of course, that was the last time I saw my mother and the rest of the family.
This is the first time Ivar has ever seen the photographs taken on the platform.
Speechless, absolutely speechless. It certainly brings back the memory, not that it ever leaves you, but it brings it back to the memory very, very crystal clear.
Londoner Ivar doesn't have any photos of his parents or most of his brothers and sisters. He spent the past 70 years trying to remember what they looked like.
You know, I've got to say this. This one looks so much like my younger brother and my little sister and my mother in the middle. The whole thing matches it so much. If I could, I'd love to just hold on my hand and even just touch them. Touch my mother's cheek. But on the other hand, maybe I just want it to be so. I don't know.
Between May and July 1944, over 400,000 Hungarian Jews faced the horror of selection on the ramp. So where was Oskar Gröning while all of this was going on? In court, prosecutors argued that he had a vital role at the ramp, guarding the luggage left by the victims until it was cleared away, ready for the next arrivals. It was all part of the great deceit.
All these deportees should have the impression nothing evil will happen to us. If they would have seen the luggage of the transports coming in before, they would have had the idea something is wrong here. Something terrible will happen with us. This was his job.
The deception on the ramp was so convincing that at the time, those separated from their family members expected to be reunited with them later. Leslie Kleinman was 14 when he arrived at Auschwitz. After being separated from the rest of his family, he went looking for them.
So I saw some people, and I said to them, I arrived with my family yesterday. I said, you know, where are they? Can you tell me? I'd like to go and see him. He says, you won't see him. I said, 3.5 hours later, they were gone. Where did they go? I still didn't catch on. He says, they went to the gas chamber, they're all dead. And I couldn't believe they got nobody now.
But Leslie held on to one glimmer of hope.
I said, there's only one person I know in my heart is alive, and that's my older sister. I know she's alive, I know.
What Leslie didn't know was that Gita, his eldest sister, was alive and had been selected for use as slave labor. But not all of those who escaped the gas chambers became part of the labor force. Shockingly, Some were chosen to be used in Nazi medical experiments, and the most sought after were twins.
So as we are holding on to Mother, a Nazi is running and yelling in German, "Twins, twins." He noticed us. Miriam and I were always dressed alike and we looked alike. And he demanded to know from my mother if we are twins. And my mother didn't know what to say. She asked if that was good, and the Nazi nodded yes, and my mother said yes. At that moment, another Nazi came, pulled my mother to the right. We were pulled by another Nazi to the left. We looked at my mother. We were crying, screaming. My mother was crying. And all I really remember is her hand was still in the air toward us, crying, and she disappeared. And I never even said goodbye to her. But I didn't really realize at that moment that this would be the last view that I would be left for the rest of my life.
Eva and her sister Miriam never saw anyone from their family alive again. Later that day, the girls were marched into their barracks. Inside on the latrine floor were the bodies of dead children.
I have never ever seen anybody dead before. But to me, that was clear, that in this place, children were dying. So right then and there, I made a silent pledge that I will do anything and everything within my power to make sure that Miriam and I shall not end up on that filthy latrine floor.
At Auschwitz in the late spring of 1944, 10-year-old Eva Kor and her twin sister Miriam had escaped the gas chambers. But they were about to face a different horror, the notorious Nazi Dr. Josef Mengele. Mengele's interest lay in genetics, and at Auschwitz he had a limitless supply of subjects for his experiments. His favorite were twins, often personally selected by him on the arrival platform.
On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we would be placed naked in a room, maybe 50 sets of twins in huge rooms. They would measure just about every part of my body, then compare it to my twin sister and compare it to charts. On alternate days, they would tie both of my arms to restrict the blood flow, take a lot of blood from my left arm, and give me 5 injections into my right arm. The content of those injections, we didn't know then, and unfortunately, I still do not know today.
Eva would reveal the consequences of those injections in her testimony against ex-Auschwitz bookkeeper Oskar Gröning. Gröning may not have known what Mengele was up to, but he knew that Jews were being murdered at Auschwitz because he saw it happen. In fact, he claimed he was so shocked by what he saw that he asked to be transferred to the Eastern Front. He said his requests were denied, but there was no evidence to support his claim, and the prosecutors argued he didn't really want to leave.
He had a wonderful life in Auschwitz. They made sports, they had their vodka, they had their beer, they had enough to eat, they had their girlfriends. All these things that all these soldiers at the front did not have. And I think this was one of the reasons to say, oh, I stay here.
It may have been good for Gröning, but what was Auschwitz like for the survivors who testified against him? In the hours after being separated from his mother, 12-year-old Eva Pearl was sent to be registered and tattooed. In the barracks, the guard issued a warning.
He said, remember one thing. He says, you've arrived at the place called Auschwitz. Don't you ever forget that. And you're being given a number now. Forget that number and you don't exist. And then all of a sudden I started crying. I want to see my mummy. I want to see my mummy. And I remember distinctly, suddenly something got hold of me. And somehow I knew, I doubt if I'll ever see my family again, that I've got to be a different person now than I was before. I'm not a child. My youth is gone.
Ivar was kept in a holding camp and waited to join the Nazi slave labor force. With little food available, he, like most prisoners, began to starve. "14-year-old Susan Pollock was starving too. In court, she described how the girls in her barracks were stripped and paraded in front of Josef Mengele, and the weakest were singled out and sent to the gas chambers.
So, we started pinching our cheeks, trying to look well, trying to look healthy, making the most of our posture. And there were some feeble-looking girls, actually, who had been selected and sent away. I was numb completely. The only time that I came alive is when we played this fantasy game. And what will you have for breakfast this morning? The game went from girl to girl. Of course, we had no food, but we remembered our home life. And that was fantastic.
"14-year-old Leslie Kleinman had grown up in a deeply religious family. But after weeks of imprisonment, forced labor, beatings and starvation, he began to question his faith.
I thought, but where is God? Where is he? I couldn't believe that, with all the effort we make to pray for God all the time, and this should happen to us. We're such a wonderful family.
The only thing that kept Leslie going was the continuing belief that he would be reunited with his eldest sister, Gita.
Every night I used to dream about her, and used to think, what, we're going to meet each other. Afterwards, we tell our stories, what happened to us. And I always thought we're definitely going to meet each other.
Unexpected reunions did happen, but tragedy was never far away. One Sunday, Ivar Pearl was working in the field, dressed in the regulation striped uniform, when he was told there were 2 girls from his village nearby.
So I went over there, and there was my 2 sisters. And I remember running to them and cuddling them, kissing. And the stupid thing, the first thing I remember saying that all my life, the first thing I said to them, look at me, I'm an adult, I'm wearing long trousers. Because until then, nobody at home wore trousers while they were a youngster. And I wanted to say to them that I'm an adult now, subconsciously, possibly trying to tell them I will look after myself.
Ivar never saw his sisters again. Meanwhile, Eva Kaur had been taken to the camp's hospital barracks with a fever, following one of Dr. Mengele's mysterious injections.
Next morning, Dr. Mengele came in, looked at my fever chart, and then he declared, laughing sarcastically. He said, "Too bad. She's so young. She has only 2 weeks to live." For the following 2 weeks, I have only one clear memory. I remember crawling on the barrack floor because I no longer could walk. And even in a semi-conscious state of mind, I kept telling myself, I must survive. I must survive.
As Eva explained in court, Mengele experimented on twins because when one died, he'd kill the other, then compare their post-mortem results.
I could not let the Nazis win. And my only way of fighting them was to stay alive and to keep Miriam alive.
It was over a month before Eva was well enough to be reunited with Miriam. Oskar Gröning continued to work at Auschwitz until October 1944, when he was sent to fight the Allies in Belgium. With the Russians advancing from the east, Auschwitz was evacuated. In January 1945, nearly 60,000 prisoners were forced on death marches to other camps. Many ended up here at Bergen-Belsen.
Belgium was a place of death, of incredible devastation of human beings' rotted flesh. Bodies were just heaped on one on top of the other. So was I dying in Belsen.
Suffering from typhus, tuberculosis and severe malnutrition, 14-year-old Susan was found close to death when the British liberated the camp in April 1945.
The English soldier, a battle-worn soldier, who had the kindness and the goodness to look for a few survivors, I was one of them. And he picked me up, seeing there was still a twitch in my body. And he handled me with such care and gentleness, I remember that. And I just let myself go, and I thought, this is heaven.
Susan's survival at Belsen was miraculous. Around 50,000 prisoners died there. Tragically, 13,000 of them in the weeks after liberation. Among them was Leslie Kleinman's sister Gita. She died from typhus 2 days after the British arrived.
I couldn't believe it. All my dreams are gone. My sister is not there now. What am I going to do? I didn't know. So it was very hard on me. This was hard. And, you know, I couldn't believe it. You know, that one thing I wanted, only one thing. I know everybody else was gone, but one thing. I didn't ask for much. Why she had to die?
Auschwitz was liberated by the Russians on the 27th of January 1945. Amongst the sacks of human hair and discarded possessions they found there were a mountain of empty suitcases, like those once guarded on the platform by Oskar Gröning. While most prisoners had already been evacuated, around 7,500 still remained. Among them were the twins used in Mengele's experiments. Captured on film, at the front of the line, were Eva and her twin sister Miriam.
And that was my first taste of freedom. For me to realize that Miriam and I were alive. That my little promise to myself that first night in the latrine became a reality, and that was an unbelievable experience.
Eva and Miriam had survived Auschwitz, but the effects of Dr. Mengele's experiments would have life-changing consequences. So how did a victim of Nazi barbarity come to forgive them? the years after the Holocaust, survivor Eva Kor started to rebuild her life. After moving to Israel with twin sister Miriam, she met and married fellow Holocaust survivor Michael, then moved to America, where she brought up their 2 children. Today, Michael suffers from poor health, and Eva looks after him.
Touchdown, 6 points plus 1, victory, 7 points.
Although Eva had left Miriam in Israel, where she started a family of her own, the twins remained very close. So when Miriam needed a kidney transplant in 1987, Eva didn't hesitate to donate one of her own.
Even though I knew she was very ill, I really was not ready to live in a world without her.
Eva suspected Miriam's illness was caused by the injections she'd been given at Auschwitz by Dr. Mengele. In the hope of finding a cure, she went on a desperate search to track down his files, but it proved an impossible task. Miriam died in Israel in 1993.
I was left with a lot of pain. I would wake up many nights, suffocating, just like my sister died. Twins have a unique connection.
But just weeks after Miriam's death, a remarkable chain of events would change Eva's life yet again. Because that's when she met this man, Hans Munch. Munch was an ex-Auschwitz doctor who Eva hoped might know the truth about Mengele's experiments.
How long had you been in research?
10 months. 10 months, yeah.
Dr. Munch told Eva that he didn't know what Mengele had done, but that he was still haunted by seeing prisoners die in the gas chambers. Eva knew that some people were beginning to deny the Holocaust had ever happened. So she persuaded Dr. Munch to make a statement at Auschwitz, admitting what he'd seen there.
That to me should be acknowledged as an important act for history. No Nazis can ever say, or neo-Nazis, that it didn't happen. We have it written and signed by the Nazi doctor who witnessed it.
Eva wanted to thank Dr. Munch for speaking out, but couldn't think how. What she came up with was shocking, because she decided to publicly forgive him. And not just him, but all the Nazis.
50 years after liberation, I, Eva Moses Kor, in my name only, hereby give amnesty to all Nazis who participated directly or indirectly in the murder of my family and millions of others. Because it's time to forgive, but not forget.
For Eva, this act of forgiveness had unexpected consequences.
Up to that time, I always reacted to what other people did to me. And in many ways, I reacted as a victim. Now, I was originating action. And that is where the feeling of power comes in forgiveness, to realize that we can control how we feel. And that was such a release of pressure, of anger. And to me, that was a very interesting result of my search for giving a gift to a Nazi. I got the biggest gift.
From that moment on, Eva began spreading her message of forgiveness and opened Candle's Museum, where she gave talks to anyone who wanted to know more. However, her controversial views were not shared by her fellow survivors. Even Jewish academics began debating Eva's message, and most disagreed with her.
I am not convinced that it is our place or our duty to forgive. Prerequisite for forgiveness is atonement. And frankly, I don't think that we owe anybody forgiveness. Justice, yes, justice we should seek and forever seek. But forgiveness, it's not our place.
Despite the criticism, Eva remained undaunted. And in the case of Oskar Gröning, she did hope for some atonement, urging him to persuade other former Nazis to admit what they'd done, to give the lie to Holocaust deniers, as this secretly filmed court footage reveals.
Appeal to your fellow Nazis to make statements, because see, with the survivors, they don't believe us. They think, oh, we are Jews, you want to accomplish something. But this is your good job to make up for the bad people. Are you feeling okay?
Gröning was clearly moved by what Eva had said. But as he was prevented from speaking to the media, we'll never know if he wanted to take up her call to action. In the days that followed, the image of the hug between Eva and Gröning went viral, and Eva's message of forgiveness became the focus of media interest in the case.
I didn't really know how big it was going to be. And it was all because Oskar hugged me and kissed me. Otherwise, the world would have not been very interested in my forgiveness.
However, for survivors like Susan Pollock, who'd lost 50 members of her family in the Holocaust, what Eva did threatened to undermine the whole point of this historically important trial.
In a courtroom where the man was tried, how could you actually not think of what he's being tried for? I don't say forgiveness hasn't got a place perhaps elsewhere, but certainly not in the Holocaust.
As a result, 49 of the survivors signed a petition in protest against Eva. Among them was Leslie Kleinman, who'd lost all his family in the Holocaust.
For nearly 70 years, you know, I've been crying and thinking of my family, which I've lost. My everything I've lost. Why should I now see the man yet for 70 years had a good life, which I didn't have? And why should I worry about him? A law is a law. You can't just go around and murder people and get away with it. He should take his punishment.
But not everyone chose to sign the petition, even though they wanted justice.
I didn't sign the petition against Eva for the simple reason because I feel as though there has to be an end to all this hatred. Somebody has got to say, right, it's time to move on. And when I saw what she did, I felt envy.
On the 15th of July 2015, judges found Oskar Gröning guilty of being an accessory to the murder of 300,000 people at Auschwitz. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Nazi hunter Günter Feld was satisfied with the verdict. For him, the quest for justice continues.
I think we should never forgive the Nazis. They have committed terrible, incredible, unique crimes against humanity and with all these poor, poor people. So, as long as I live and I do any job which could enable me to prosecute Nazis, I will do it.
It's now over 70 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. For the survivors, the memory of what happened to them and their families will never go away. Whether Eva Kor's message of forgiveness is right or wrong is open to debate. But she remains determined to spread the word whenever she can.
For me, it's very sad that any victim remains victim. All I can do is show them that there is a choice out there. I believe that forgiveness is such a powerful thing, and maybe if I live long enough and I talk long enough about it, that people will try it, because this world desperately needs forgiveness. And I want everybody to help me sow those seeds of peace throughout the world.